Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about the changes that Jon Snow experienced after betrayal from his own men, after his death and resurrection, about the changes that most of fans didn't even recognize. Firstly, I'm going to talk for a few moments about the reasons because of which showrunners had to kill Jon, whereupon I'm going to talk about the changes that Jon's death brought to him. When Ollie dealt the finishing blow to Jon in the season 5 finale, it was the most upset scene since the Red Wedding. We've had our hero, we've had Jon Snow, and all of a sudden he had been killed. Our anger towards David and Dan has never been as high as in that very moment. Our hero was laying down on the ground of Castle Black as his eyes were lifeless with all the wounds on his torso as the screen faded to black. Ironical fact is that Sir Alliser Thorne orchestrated Jon's death, the man that ended on the wall because he fought for Jon's true father, fought on House Targaryen's side during Robert's rebellion, fought for Rhaegar Targaryen. But Jon was surprisingly brought back to life after only a few episodes, which raised a few important questions such as why did he even die, and what's its purpose, why it had to happen, in order to provide what. Few sources such as media assured their readers and watchers that Jon's death was derived by showrunners to focus on Jon in order to forget about their, as media said, mistakes about the whole Dorne story. Media also tried to solve this question with statements that showrunners killed Jon to push all negativity about their writing aside, along with the statement that the season 5 finale with the cliffhanger of Jon's death also brought more fame to them. It's possible that the media is right, that showrunners brought Jon's death in order to distract viewers from criticism and in order to bring more publicity, but while it might be possible, I definitely don't agree that Dan Weiss and David Benioff wrote Jon's death only to avoid the criticism. In my opinion, Jon's death was written to set him as the king in the north. It's very simple. If Jon didn't die, he wouldn't have left the wall. No matter of the North and Winterfell being ruled by Boltons, no matter on Sansa's pain, and the matter of Rickon being Ramsay's prisoner, Jon wouldn't have left the wall as he didn't when his father, aka uncle, was killed and while his brother, aka cousin, marched south. Now that I brought you my opinion on the importance of Jon's death, the reason of why showrunners had to write it, let's move on the changes that this same death brought to Jon Snow. It didn't change Jon as it changed Beric Dondarrion, who didn't recover from any of his deaths. As being resurrected, Dondarrion lost large pieces of his memory each time, or as Catelyn Stark that is resurrected by Lord Dondarrion in the books and appears as Lady Stoneheart with her appearance being altered, with her flesh becoming soft and looks more like a zombie than a human being, so don't worry, death didn't change Jon on the way as it changed Lord Dondarrion and Catelyn Stark. Jon's story in the last season was about his death. Not about the death of his body, but the death of his spirit, his hopes and his beliefs, which is much more meaningful. Jon his whole life has been doing things the best he could, following the justice and honor, but still, his own goodness got him killed by his own people at the Castle Black. Jon's death lasted only a few episodes, but the following episodes were of a huge importance, since at the moment of Jon's resurrection until the season 6 finale, Jon was afraid, but not because of the death. He was afraid of the fact that he can't control his own destiny. Jon did what he considered as the best choice, and those same choices got him killed. He was dead and brought back to life in short amount of time, whereupon he was confused and afraid. Jon was confused because of the fact that some kind of a superior force, some kind of god brought him back to life, but on the other hand, he experienced from the first place that there is nothing after death, as he replied himself on Melisandre's question when she asked him where did he go and what did he see after the death, with nothing, nothing at all. Jon because of this was confused, since he is aware that something has to exist, but at the same time there was nothing after death, accompanied with a fear of not being able to control his own destiny is the biggest change that Jon experienced after being brought back to life. Kit Harington, an actor that played Jon Snow, said that the line in which Melisandre asked him about the life after death, about what did he see, on which Jon replied with nothing, was brilliant to him, as Kit considers that it cut right into the deepest fear, that there is nothing after death, a line that Harington considers as the most important line in the whole season. Well, the Battle of the Bastards definitely was a heroic story of a small amount of men helping to their leader, helping Jon Snow to retake the Winterfell, to take control of the North. It also was a story about Jon's personality that changed upon betrayal of his own men. This battle wouldn't even have happened if Jon hadn't been killed, or if Sansa didn't say that she'll take Winterfell, their home, with or without his help, as his first response on Sansa's request to regain Winterfell from Bolton's was, I'm quoting, "I'm tired of fighting. It's all I've done since I left home. I fought and I lost." Even upon realizing that there is not any other way, upon realizing that he has to retake the Winterfell, at least to try it, Jon was still afraid, not afraid of the fact that he and his makeshift army were greatly outnumbered, not the fact that he might die, but of the fact that he might be resurrected again, as we could see in one scene that took place on the night before the battle, as we could see a scene in which Jon Snow came to Melisandre and said, "If I die, don't bring me back." Kit Harington stated that Jon has never been afraid of death, which in his opinion made Jon strong and honorable person, but Harington also said that Jon doesn't want to die again, not to mention to be revived again. Now we're coming to the few most important scenes that happened in Jon's story in the last season. First scene that was of the greatest meaning was a scene in which Jon Snow failed to protect his own little brother, a scene in which Rickon was killed in front of him, a scene that changed the whole battle. While a huge amount of us fans are believing that upon Rickon's death, Jon charged in order to outrun the oncoming arrows or even to kill Ramsay, I'm not of the same opinion, since Jon could have gone easily back to his own army as he had a few moments to decide. A scene in which both Davos Seaworth and Tormund were hoping that Jon will come back, that he won't lead his army to certain defeat. Those few scenes were a perfect example of Jon's personality and the way of thinking that has changed after the betrayal of his own people after his own death. If this battle somehow happened before his resurrection, which wouldn't be possible, since if not for his own death, which led him to leave the Ancient Order, to leave the Night's Watch as his watch ended, he would have still been on the wall, but let's imagine if that battle somehow did happen before the season 5 finale, the Battle of the Bastards would have been much different. First off, upon Rickon's death, Jon wouldn't have charged, wouldn't have led his army to a certain defeat, which he did because he wanted to be in control over his own destiny, not because Ramsay played him out, but because of Jon's fear that he doesn't have control over his own life, because some kind of god brought him back to life for some purpose, which Jon doesn't understand, and at the same time is confused. Since there was nothing after death, his last hope for his purpose and desire for life disappeared with Rickon's life. At that point, at a point in which he went down, at a point in which the enemy cavalry was charging on him, Jon was ready to die. He has done everything he could, but still failed to save his little brother's life. In his opinion, he was ready and assured that the moment in which he gloriously pulled his sword out, that it's his final swing, his final fight, and that's one of the two moments in which Jon, let's call it, started recovering over his resurrection. That's a moment in which Jon's army that he somehow managed to gather showed up and saved his life. That's a moment in which Jon was ready to die, but at the same time, that's a moment in which Jon started figuring out that he led his army to a certain defeat, that those men which would have surely abandoned any other general in order to save their own heads, but they didn't abandon Jon, they charged into the enemy. They charged with awareness of a certain defeat, they charged because they loved and believed in Jon Snow. As the battle progressed, Jon was almost buried alive beneath the bodies. That situation in which traumatized, resurrected Jon would have given up and died, but not Jon, who realized that he's much more important for his own people, for the North, more than he thought, not Jon, who literally experienced the rebirth, who decided to fight beside his people until his last breath. That's the moment in which Jon, crushed under the weight and chaos of attackers both dead and alive, decided to live and fought his way up through a throng of men and finally breathed again. Let me just add that this whole scene in which Jon almost died in a human crush was actually Kit Harington's own idea, which director Miguel Sapochnik accepted. Jon's look in his eyes upon climbing over the bodies and the stare that he gave to Ramsay, that's the moment in which Jon fully recovered of his death and resurrection, a moment in which Jon decided to live, to fight. Even if he is going to die again eventually, but he will fight until his last day. He will make choices following his honor and his inner voice, as he always did. Kit Harington said that this same scene is some kind of a rebirth for him, along with the statement that Jon didn't stay down upon being almost buried alive because he decided to live, he fought and survived. So yeah, Jon's death did bring him fear and confusion, which he fought against the whole last season, but finally beat it up in the moment of retaking his home upon regaining Winterfell. In conclusion, Jon has changed mentally. He knows that there is only one life, and he will doubtlessly try to do as much as he can, will continue to fight for his men, for his people,